I'm going to go with the Edmonton Journal's take on this. And I'm going to start with the floor was open to questions. Today, the brain trust of the Edmonton Oilers met with their season ticket holders. And it was every bit as much fun as we might think. And we'll get into the numbers in a second here. Man raised the issue of the team having 8 coaches and 4 or 5 GMs since the last time there was a significant change in the infrastructure of upper management. Nicholson took issue with that, suggesting Chiarelli changed about 50% of the group, exonerating Kevin Lowe as having zero involvement in hockey operations during the entire time, praising Gretzky as a fine ambassador for the club, and saying Craig McTavish, while still involved in hockey ops, had seen his role changed to overseeing Bakersfield. One lady asked specifically if fans can expect an apology from management or any kind of statement from Daryl Katz, with the answer involving a spirited defense of Katz. He's one of you, seemed a bit over the top, and a tepid word disappointment with the performance of the team. I spoke briefly with the questioner afterwards, and she said neither of her dual queries were answered at all, let alone to her satisfaction. The Oilers are not good enough. And today, blame got thrown around. And the best apology offered by anyone was by McDonald, who acknowledged and personally owned an error made in offering 40% off Cyber Mondays, which was taken as a slap in the face by some who had paid the full fare. It was a dumb decision by us, and by us I mean me, he said, in a refreshingly candid change of pace from most of the morning's talking points. Talking points are simple. This team didn't go to the playoffs. Why? Well, have you checked out hashtags on Twitter? One of the trending hashtags was blame Toby. I don't know how trending it is still, but if you're in Edmonton, probably trending in that area. Blame Toby Rieder, because Bob Nicholson said if Toby Rieder had 10 to 12 goals this year, we would be in a playoff spot. Toby Rieder. Here's the thing. The Edmonton Oilers currently have 4 20 goal scorers. They also have 4 guys who have double digits in goals. Leading the way is Draisaitl with 43, McDavid with 36, Nugent Hopkins with 24, and Chiasson with 20. And you cannot expect Chiasson to score 20 again next year. It's been a great season for Chiasson, but if you look at his career totals, 20 is probably a bit much to expect from him next year. Now, Toby Rieder stands out. He's got 0 goals. Lucic has 5. Compare their salaries and their overall numbers. Here's the other problem. So you're a player in the Edmonton locker room and you hear this. Now, if you're a friend of Toby Rieder's, you're going to come to his defense. If you're not, you're going to go, yeah. But you may very well turn and say, well, wait a minute. He's still under contract here. Why are they throwing shade at a guy who's under contract and still playing for the team? And if you're Toby Rieder, why are you showing up for the last 10 games? They're not re-signing you. I guess you play it out for pride. I guess Rieder could go on a tear. Ever since Jim Lights came out and said that Jamie Benn and Sagan were blah 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 blah, and he had a Tourette's episode. They've been pretty solid, and Dallas has pulled themselves out of the muck. Maybe Rieder scores a hat trick tonight. Not entirely likely, but what did they expect with Toby Rieder? That's the question I find myself asking. And the other thing is when he comes out and says, well, we're looking to add 2 or 3 skilled forwards in the offseason and a skilled defenseman. Okay, from where and how are the questions I ask, because you look at this lineup, they don't have a whole lot to offer. Okay, if I'm making a trade right now and I go to the Oilers and I'm like, all right, so you want my skilled forward here. We'd like to talk to you about, well, let's see. You're not going to trade us McDavid. You're not going to trade us Draisaitl. Can we talk about Nugent Hopkins? You're not interested in trading Nugent Hopkins. Gotcha. Darnell Nurse, that's a non-starter. Okay. Chiasson's not interesting to us. Expiring contract too. Not interesting. Clefbaum, you guys probably aren't talking. Not only that, but we're kind of worried about his injury history over the last couple of years. Kassian, no interest in Kassian right now. He's got 13 goals, but from another team's perspective, if you're trading out a skilled forward, Kassian's not going to be enough of a return. Lucic, nobody wants the contract. Kara's a good young forward. The Oilers would be crazy to trade him. He doesn't have the offensive upside of some of the other players that you see within the organization, like a Puljujarvi or Yamamoto, but the work ethic is there. Larson, they may try to trade Larson. maybe to erase Chiarelli. And boy, did they throw Chiarelli under the bus today. Like, Chiarelli had a lot of power here. Okay, well, if he was a bad GM and he had a lot of power, why did he start this season? Like, if you knew he was a bad, if it's so obvious that he was doing badly as a GM, why wasn't something done before this season? Why did it take this season going badly before people go, all right, now we got to get him out? Benning with 5 goals, 10 assists, he's not going to be considered a core guy or somebody who's going to get you a lot back. Russell, same thing. Ratty was supposed to be a top 6 forward this year. It didn't work out. Now, whether it's because coaches pushed him to the side or Ratty didn't play well enough, it depends who you ask. But Ratty's not a top 6 forward. Puljujarvi, of course, had his opportunities. They were squandered. Again, maybe it's coach's problem. When you get into multiple coaches having problems with the same player, I tend to go back to the player. I tend to say, okay, 1 coach, maybe 2 coaches. Now I put it on the player. Brodziak is not top 6 of any sort. Gagne may very well have some top 6 upside for the Oilers next year. So in red, with the red asterisks, you've got Gagne, Nugent Hopkins, Draisaitl, McDavid. Those are 4 guys that I think will comprise 4 of their top 6 next season, potentially. Gagne ideally would be on their 3rd line. But I'm not sure that Puljujarvi is going to take that jump. If he does, he may not be able to take it in Edmonton. And again, because Toby Rieder gets thrown under the bus while he is a member of the Edmonton Oilers, this is going to have an effect. Now, if I'm a free agent, and let's say I have an option between Nashville and Edmonton, money's the same. I'm going to look at Nashville and say, it's a team that's been a contender for a while, or at least in the playoffs for a while. They can offer me decent money. I get a nice tax break being there. Edmonton taxes are going to be higher. You got the harsh Edmonton winter. And then the team seems to just be mired in this mediocrity. And I would love to play with McDavid. That's a huge boost. But I look at these other players that have gone to Edmonton, and I don't know. I don't know if I want to go to Edmonton. So when you get a guy like Toby Rieder who wants to come and play for you, and within his first season of being there, you throw him under the bus and you're like, he's not coming back. We're not renewing him. It sends a message of how quickly you'll sour on a player. For all of the complaints about Vancouver and how they've done things, and while I understand them, I will say they did not rush to judgment against Louis Eriksson. Louis Eriksson didn't become a healthy scratch until year 3, and he played very well last night against Ottawa. So, you know, it's this dance that you do when it comes to trying to keep your team attractive to other players around the league, so that when they're free agents, and especially if you have a guy who has a no trade clause where he can say, I have 6 teams I'm not going to, you don't want to be one of those 6 teams. I get the feeling Edmonton's on that kind of a list. If a team has if a player has a no trade clause, he can say, I have 8 teams I'm not going to. I think Edmonton may very well be on the list for a number of players in that situation, because it's been there before. We talked about the players poll yesterday. That players poll used to talk about negatives. Used to talk about which teams would you like to play for, which teams do you not want to play for, who are the most overrated players in the league. They didn't do that this time around, likely because it causes so much conversation, and players don't want to answer questions about why they don't want to play in Buffalo or Edmonton or wherever, right? Because that's just a question they don't want to get into. Or who voted for that? They don't want that being an issue either. So just keep it sunshiny and talk about who has the best hair, and just leave that kind of stuff out of it. But for me with Edmonton, it's interesting because to say if we had 10 goals from Toby Rieder this year, we'd be in the playoffs is ignorant and stupid. 203 goals for, 242 goals against. I'm no mathematician, but that's 39 less goals for than against, and 10 is less than 39. Goals for per game this year, the number 20 at 2.78. Yes, if he had 10 goals, that would help. Toby Rieder's 10 goals does nothing for their goals against. They're 26th in the league at 3.31. Do you know what's interesting, too, is Nicholson said today that the extension for Mikko Koskinen was totally made up by the brain trust of the Edmonton Oilers. What that tells me is that if Mikko Koskinen next year has a poor season and doesn't pan out, that is directly on the brain trust of the Oilers. They are 100% on the hook for that, and we'll see how that turns out for them. Power play, number 11 in the league at 20.9%. Doesn't need Toby Rieder to score. Penalty kill at number 33. or at 30th in the NHL with 75.3%. And I'm sure it feels like they're 33rd out of 31 teams. But Rieder's not part of that. Face-off winning percentage, they're 26th in the league at 48.4%. Shots against per game, they're number 20 at 31.9. So these numbers here tell me that if Toby Rieder had 10 goals, I'm sorry, Mr. Nicholson, you're not in the playoffs. Leading after the first, they're 16-6-2. Leading after the second, they're 19-2-3. Trailing after the first, they're 7-16-2. Trailing after the second, 4-28-3. The Oilers are a team that they have confidence in themselves when they're leading, but as soon as they're behind, that confidence fades quickly. Thus the issues when they're trailing. Now, after the first, that's not bad. 7 wins when trailing after first isn't bad. 4 wins after trailing after 2, but when you look at their goals per period, 66 in the first, 65 in the second, 64 in the third. In overtime, they have a grand total of 8 goals. So it is not a tire fire because they have Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. These two guys keep this team from being a laughingstock. The problem is there isn't a whole lot in the rest of this organization that tells me this can be turned around quickly. And I understand that Bakersfield's had an amazing season, and I that's great. And they talked about that with season ticket holders too, kind of like, hey, these kids are coming up, they're pretty good, our American League team is fine. And that's great, but American League success does not equal NHL success. It can, but it doesn't always. It is an inaccurate predictor of how things are going to turn out at the NHL level. What if Tyler Benson doesn't pan out at the NHL level? I like Tyler Benson. Watched him with the Vancouver Giants. Good player. That being said, we'll see how he does at the NHL level. Maybe he ends up on McDavid's wing, and maybe it's fantastic. But there's a lot of maybes in there. And for an Oilers fan base, and this was said to management at this conference with the season ticket holders, that it's getting harder and harder to believe as Oiler fans. These tickets are getting harder and harder to get rid of in games they don't want to go to. They have to literally give them away if they can find somebody to take them off their hands because the team is miserable at times. And they seem to be trending in the wrong direction. And of course, people point this out, both Oiler fans and non-Oiler fans, that this is during what could be McDavid's best seasons. He's had 100 points in 3 straight seasons. He might be having his best season ever right now. And now what? Can we look at this Oilers roster right now and say it's getting better? Did Puljujarvi trend in the right direction this year? No. Did Yamamoto end up coming up and being and did he show he's able to play a top 6 role in the NHL? No. Could he? Absolutely. Could they both? Sure. But to continue to push that narrative isn't going to work. So Nicholson comes out, and rather than say, well, we're going to count on Puljujarvi and Yamamoto next year, he says, we're going to bring in a couple of forwards and a defenseman, but he doesn't say how. And he'll criticize and throw Chiarelli under the bus, which is fine, and throw Toby Rieder under the bus, which is baffling, and not mention Lucic by name. As far as I can tell and everything I've heard, Lucic doesn't get mentioned. They don't talk about the Lucic contract or the fact that he's underperformed. Lucic himself would stand up at a conference like that and say, I have not performed up to my contract, and I'm sorry. Lucic, pretty stand-up guy off the ice. And honestly, this team would stand in front of season ticket holders and apologize. And you know, the part that gets me is Connor McDavid himself would stand there, look season ticket holders in the eye and say, we haven't been good enough this year, even though he has. He would 100% take the responsibility along with the rest of the players. And that's too bad. Because McDavid, I've watched him drag this team to wins this year that they really probably shouldn't win. I've watched him do it the last few weeks where he is dragging them to wins. And he is one of those players that when he's not scoring points and goals, he is still very important out there. He does a heck of a lot more than just the scoring part of things. He's tenacious on and off the puck. And the Oilers, there's some real questions they have to answer. And for Nicholson, they're now on the hook. This is their roster. This is what they've done. Now, whether they decide to go with a general manager, they actually go through a process of hiring, which he kind of said we've never really done an interviewing process before. It's basically just been we're hiring this guy now, which we've seen that, and we've seen where that leads. It's encouraging, but they really have to get down to it. You want to have a general manager in place before the draft. You have to have a permanent general manager in place before the draft, and especially going into free agency, because again, you can't say, hey, it's July 1st. We understand you're a free agent, Mr. Panarin. We would like to talk to you about the city of Edmonton. Currently, we're working on getting a general manager. We're working on it. We've missed the playoffs a couple of years in a row. We're working on that too. We're not 100% sold on our blue line, but we're working on that. We've had some problems with free agents we've brought in, but we're working on that as well. See, at that point, Panarin's like, can I put you on hold? And he's going over to a call from San Jose or Anaheim or Florida or somebody else who's going to say, we've got this great young team, come on over and join us. And he's gone. You need to create a situation where it's an attractive place to play for free agents, where it's an attractive place to play for players who are older and veterans, because that's what they need. They need that veteran leadership. When I look at the Toronto Maple Leafs, one thing they got right, and I kind of panned it at the time, I wasn't a big fan of it, and I still like it. Marleau came in at the absolute right time for Toronto. Came in and mentored a very young team. This is a team that does not have a Patrick Marleau type, and that's what they need. They need a guy who can come in for a few years and sort of take that role as unofficial leader. Not the captain, that's still McDavid, but in the locker room, on the ice, in certain situations, he's your guy. And they don't have that. They have some decent top 9 guys. I don't see them as a team with a whole lot of top 6 outside of your McDavid, Draisaitl, and Nugent-Hopkins trio. And when the three of them end up playing together on special teams, and McDavid and Draisaitl end up on the same line a lot because they're trying to get something going, that's not good, because it means now you've got lines 2, 3 through 4 where you don't have that offensive upside. And you look at some of the better teams in the league, and they can roll 4 lines, and they'll usually have 2 or 3 very good scoring lines. So for the Oilers, I don't know. I don't know how they turn this around, and I know when management was asked today about it, they kind of ducked it. They ducked some questions about it, and they didn't want to answer it, because I don't think they know how to turn it around either. So what I'm asking Oiler fans with that is this. Is it Toby Rieder's fault? The right answer to that is no. And 2, how do they fix this? Because when I did the video on Buffalo, I had Oiler fans saying, you should do this with Edmonton. And I thought, I don't know how to do this with Edmonton without it being kind of the same. And then Nicholson spoke today and went, oh, okay. Yeah, all right, I could do that. Because it's not Toby Rieder's fault. And you could throw Ty Ratty under the bus if you want to, but it's not Ty Ratty's fault. Ty Ratty is not an NHL level player as a top 6 guy. He can fill in. He can get hot on for shortened periods of time. And certainly in the preseason, he was dynamite. But realistically, you need to have a better top 6. And that blue line, it's still lacking. And Chiarelli's been gone for a bit now. And starting this summer, if you really want to show that Chiarelli was the problem, it's going to be interesting to see how they do it. Let me know what you guys think, though. Like I said, Oiler fans, let me know what you guys think about the situation. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And hey, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.